This is California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Paul Audley is joining us today. He is the president of Film LA. Briefly, what is Film LA?
Film LA is the county and city film office. We actually represent 18 jurisdictions as their film permit office, and like a film commission.
We're in the Southern California area today, and I grabbed a recent edition of the Los Angeles Times. In the business section, I see this headline: "Runaway projects are costly." When they say runaway, they're referring to Hollywood productions that are no longer filming in California and filming elsewhere. The subheadline: California has lost nearly $2 billion over 4 years. Billion.
That's $2 billion based on the projects that were not able to get the California tax credit. There's some multiplier of that, of activity that never even got into the pool and went elsewhere.
Let's back up and talk about what you're referring to, and that's the tax credit.
Right.
In California, there is a tax credit program that it's hard to deny is a paltry stepchild of other states' programs. Is that a fair assessment?
It is. When they enacted this, we referred to it as putting a toe in the water to compete. It simply doesn't, but it has had some good impact.
$100 million yearly tax credit?
$100 million a year available to provide in tax credits to the film industry. And we see, for example, this year nearly 500 applicants for that tax credit, and 23 projects were funded, leaving the rest to go elsewhere.
Tell us, because I know you know the answer, the projects that stayed, what did they do in California? The projects that left, what do they do elsewhere?
So the projects that have stayed have resulted in multi-billion dollars. So we've spent about $700 million over the course of this project, and there's $5.3 billion in direct spending. This isn't this respend or go off and do something else. This is direct spending in California, and it represents about $1.7 billion in wages to below the line workers. That means not the celebrities, not the directors and producers, but those folks you think of as cast and crew.
The projects that left, $2 billion worth.
$2 billion of those that did not get the tax credit.
That even applied.
Right, that applied. So there's a whole nother raft of film companies and television shows that didn't apply for the tax credit because it's only really available one day a year, and they've gone elsewhere as well.
And our friends in New York are just kicking our behinds.
They sure are.
They have a tax credit program that's worth $420 million, and it's working.
It's working, and it's available to more kinds of production. California limits who can even apply. So television, dramatic television, for the most part, can't use it unless they leave California first. And it's not just New York. We know that, for example, in the UK, they just announced that 81% of their $1.8 billion in revenue last year from film was U.S. films in England.
My brother-in-law is a film producer. I can't think of the last time he filmed in California. And his films are box office hit type films. I cannot think of a time he last filmed in California.
No, and we're seeing that we've virtually lost the largest films in the world. We used to manage to do about 64% of the true blockbusters, and we're down to about 2%. We're just not producing the kinds of numbers we should on the high-end film and high-end television. It's gone.
Let's talk about pilots. I hate to throw numbers at you, but right now I'll be a numbers guy. In 2014, 82% of all pilots were shot in California in 2006. In 2014, 44%.
Right. And it's tragic. It just reflects all the other forms of production. But television pilots, we used to pretty much own them.
Right.
And now we're down below 50%. The same is true with television, where we used to pretty much own that at about 85%, and now we're down in the 40%. For dramatic television,
Got it.
1 hour dramas. So this is a pattern that has existed now for over a decade, and the state of California simply has not yet begun to compete to keep and bring back that business.
Why?
Well, it's a complex state is part of it. When we first started this campaign to get something to keep the business, there was a belief that it wouldn't leave. We've now proven that not only would it has in fact left. And I think the competing needs of Northern and Southern California, until recently when we were able to show, for example, there are 11 counties outside of LA that have said this industry has had a dramatic impact economically in the California Film Commission study. And so we were able to start to show in Sacramento that this isn't just an LA-based issue. It actually affects people all over the state.
How do you respond to those that would say that tax credits for film and television, oh, that's just another version of corporate welfare?
Well, some people just hate tax credits altogether, and whether they're good public policy or not, the truth is, if California doesn't fight back against the 44 states and multiple countries that are offering them, it surrenders the industry to them. So whether you believe policy-wise they're a good idea, the option of not participating in this right now is to lose the business.
Now, interestingly, earlier this year, the chief legislative analyst commented on a pending tax credit bill, which we'll talk about momentarily. And the office said that the tax incentive arms race, that's their term, was creating a race to the bottom.
Mm-hmm. It's a phrase that I've heard other people use, and the theory being everybody's going to lose money in the end. And the truth is, probably this arms race would not have existed if, when Vancouver started this by trying to take business from California, the state had stood up then and said, stop, it's ours. But now all these other states and countries are in the game. They're having a hard time giving the idea of getting out of the game, and I think if California truly competes, many of them will have to fall by the wayside. It simply won't be economical for them to continue if we return a lot of this high-value production.
So I live near Culver City, the home of Sony, and I know specifically that Sony recently announced that it was moving ImageWorks to your favorite Canadian city, or province I should say, Vancouver, taking about 700 jobs. British Columbia has a 60% credit for local hiring. It goes on and on.
It does go on, and the truth is, as we've sat on the sidelines, different pieces of the business like VFX and animation and music now are being recruited into these other states as they begin to develop infrastructure and all of the things surrounding making a film that used to still be done in LA. And so it's sort of a now or never situation for California. We're losing vendor base, we're losing critical support, we're losing pre and post-production services. And unless we stop that, we become a second-tier production center.
So as we speak today, there is a bill floating around in Sacramento with a tax credit program attached to it. We don't know the number. Does it broaden the categories, though?
It does. It takes the restriction off film at being under $75 million, but caps the budget amount they can apply for at $100 million. In other words, you could have a blockbuster $300 million movie, but the credit will only apply to the first $100 million.
And what about television?
Television, the restriction on television drama for networks will go away, so they can apply immediately in their first season.
And comedies?
Comedies have always been in there, and I think they will still be in it. We have not seen the same amount of flight from those half-hour comedies, mostly because the expense is so low on producing them by comparison. It doesn't really make sense to chase those incentives in other states.
What about commercials?
So commercials are not in this tax credit bill.
Should they be? Is that your position?
The commercial producers have been pushing for one to support them as well. It isn't in the current bill.
Are other jurisdictions, do they include commercials in their programs?
Some do, some don't. You really can't do an apples to apples with these programs anywhere. They are very different in how they apply, what you can do with the money, all kinds of things.
So as I mentioned, as we speak today, we don't know the number. What will put a smile on Paul Audley's face?
I really think we need to make a statement to the industry that we will compete and compete hard. And to me, that means we have to at least match New York at $420 million. There are other states like Louisiana and Georgia that have no cap. That's crazy, and we shouldn't do that.
Because?
Because it's an unlimited drain on resources after a period of time. But to say to the industry, we're serious enough to compete with New York, which is where a great deal of our television has gone, and a lot of our film as well, is an important signal to the industry if we want to keep it here and continue to be Hollywood.
He is Paul Audley. He is the president of Film LA. My name is Brad Pomerance, and this is California Edition.